Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest. Welcome back, Side Questers. Happy to have you and our resident Star Wars expert, Matt, joining us again to discuss Dynasty of Evil, Part 3. We are looking forward to hearing everything he has to say about all of the Star Wars information that Slav and I don't have a clue about, and to hear where he disagrees with me on all of my book theories for Dynasty of Evil.
Except for one.
So looking forward to that. Except for one. I think I'm actually just looking forward to the one. Just want to know the one that you agree with, but we'll get into that in a minute. Matt, how you doing?
Fantastic. I got some good coffee in me. Ready to talk about more Star Wars.
That's great. We've been looking forward to this episode. So we had a lot of questions. Well, theories. We had theories in the other episodes of what did or didn't happen to Bane, and at the end. So
yeah, I saved it. I think you heard it in the recording, Matt. I saved my theory for what happened, whether Bane lived or didn't live, or to what extent did he survive the body hopping,
soul snatching,
all the things.
Slava, you want to give us a quick background before we dive in?
I do. So we are in the final episode of the final book in the Bane trilogy. We meet Bane in this book as he is reconsidering his choice of Xana. And Xana, perceiving that Bane is going to betray her, she gets her own apprentice, who ends up betraying her. It all comes to a head when Xana finally does challenge Bane. And when they finally get to Umbria by the end of the book, I'm just going to say it up front that she bests him in that battle and walks away with another apprentice, a huntress, an assassin.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really sharp conclusion. I like the ending to this trilogy quite a bit.
Before we dive in, make sure you smash that subscribe button so that you never miss out on a side quest.
All right. So, Matt, one of the things that we discussed was, is this our favorite book of the trilogy? I think, for me, it is. For Jonathan, it's not. What do you say?
So this is the one thing that I agree with Jonathan on about this book, that this is not my favorite book of the trilogy. Honestly, it is my third favorite, but that is in no means to say that this is a bad book.
Right.
I love it quite a bit. It's a great conclusion. I think of it, and I know we've brought Mass Effect into this, multiple times. The Mass Effect trilogy, like the third game, I thought was still great, but it was the worst game of the three, and worst is a hard word. I really enjoyed the pacing in this one as opposed to the second one, because like I think Jonathan said in the previous recording, the second one was the slowest, and then this one was just a great finish or flourish, I guess, with the way this book was paced and everything that was going on, because Bane is a lot more prominent in this book than it is book 2. I'm curious, Jonathan, is the first book is your favorite? I think you said, right?
Yeah, because Bane has a more clear arc. That's why I like it, because I prefer character growth in my books. That's the big draw for me. Whereas, like, book 2, it just feels like he's collecting a lot of toys, and we get a lot of Xana, which is fine, but book 3 felt like there was at least a little more character arc again, where he's like, oh, right, I have a mission. And one of the points Slav and I discussed was, does character growth need to be positive? And I said, no, it doesn't. Because I think, Slava, correct me if I'm wrong, but your original take when I said it was like, well, not every story has a happy ending.
That's
right,
true.
And not every story needs growth. And I think you then distinguish between positive growth and like negative, well, not growth, but a reversion in a character arc. You almost goes the opposite way,
Mm-hmm.
if I could use that term. And Jonathan pressed on that for a different book. But yes, essentially, you're right, Jonathan.
Man, I don't get sick of hearing that.
That you're essentially right.
Essentially. He has an opinion that you agree with. That's what he's happy about.
Essentially.
No, I'm happy that people tell me that I'm right. It happens more often than you'd think. Almost daily. It's because I got married.
Yeah. The the first book, I think why the second book was, I don't want to spend too much time on the second book, but why the second book I feel like was so much slower is because that was basically Xana's side quest. Now, Bane was hardly in it, yes, but Xana was also not in the first book, except for in the epilogue, or the last chapter. I can't remember if it was last chapter or epilogue. Anyways, so the first chapter was to build up Bane, his past, his ambition, and his power. And then in the second one, it was confirmation of Bane's power, and then the training and maturation of Xana, and their conflicting doubts against each other and the future of the Rule of Two, which is why the book was called the Rule of Two. And then in 3, it's the culmination of book 1 and 2, with Bane brought back into the fold as a powerful being, but he's also struggling with his age, and Xana, more powerful than ever, still unsure of herself and if she is even capable of taking the mantle of Dark Lord, which is why I think that struggle, the internal struggle between the two main characters here, bringing in the two potential apprentices as well, I thought was really, really cool, because then you're basically pitting master against master at this point, since they both have new apprentices, and then they're just like, all right, well, we're going to have at it, and then whoever wins, you get to pick the apprentice, and they get to fight it out. So it's like this crazy dog fighting. I just thought it was really, really cool the way that he put a bow on this one, because of how it's not a good guy story. It's a very, very bad guy story. And I was always very fascinated with it. Not because I like to be a villain, but because you don't read very many books or hear very many stories, one, from the villain's perspective, and 2, that are actually worth spending time on or investing your mental capacity in.
For sure. And I think because Bane is an interesting, dynamic bad guy, he's not two-dimensional, I enjoy him. And that's why I identify with, that's the right term, with Magneto from the X-Men. Shut up, Xavier. Roll yourself over there and, have a cup of coffee. But I'm on Magneto's side. Just because he's such a powerful force, such an endearing bad guy, especially in the new series that came out on Disney Plus, where it's like a revisit to the old cartoons, which I used to love.
X-Men, yeah.
Yeah. And even in the movies, especially in the new ones. But that aside, that's why Bane is such a fun read.
He's not a sympathy villain. So many bad guys nowadays, and then, higher media, it's just the bad guy exists just to be sympathized with. They're a bad guy, yes, for bad guy's sake, so the plot can happen, but they're not a really bad guy. Like, a perfect example, I don't know if did you watch the Obi-Wan series on Disney Plus?
No.
Okay, so Obi-Wan, one of the most prominent favorite characters in Star Wars history, right? He's been in just about every single movie except for the sequels, and he is the mentor to Anakin, the mentor to Darth Vader. And then at that point, after Revenge of the Sith, he's the mentor to Luke. And he dies, in episode 4, but still, he's the mentor, okay? But in the Obi-Wan series, there's this character who is the main villain. I don't even remember her name. Reba? I always called her Black Reba. Reva, that's her name, Reva. But she was just like this misunderstood kid who saw a lot of bad things happen and then just decided to be evil, essentially. And then at the end of the series, she had her redemption in like 15 minutes through a series of flashbacks. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to sympathize with the person who just went and killed a bunch of innocent people. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Sympathy bad guys that have an undeserved character arc, I can't stand, because that's lazy, cheap writing. Absolute garbage. A bad guy who's bad, objectively, but he's a captivating, interesting character that's well-formed, and you can understand the things he's doing and not agree with them, but still follow along and enjoy his story, like Magneto, like Bane. I'm all for it. But when we get a bad guy and then we see his backstory and it's the abused little kid who don't know better, and now he's massacring innocents by the by the dozens. Now you take Magneto, a Holocaust survivor. He's seen a lot of things, and he has now chosen to react to the world, to fight the other side, as it will, in a particular way. And it's written in such a way where I'm like, damn, Magneto, yeah, all right, I get it. It's a story that draws you in.
This is the thing that I really did enjoy about book 3 is Bane just digs into his strength. I love the torture scene, if you could call it that.
Where he's just loving the torture. Ooh, tickle me more, princess.
Yeah.
Yeah, where he has her question her own existence again because he's like,
Yep.
you're supposed to have power and you don't have any, and doesn't even acknowledge the fact that he's being tortured. I wanted more moments like that where Bane got to be Bane, like Bane Prime, if I can call him that, as opposed to, like, again, book 2 where we don't really see him, but like, show me the Sith side. Don't show me him collecting toys. I understand he needs them for, like, moving the plot along, and that's fine, but show me Bane Prime. I don't know a better way to say it, but like, show me him and his strength.
Yeah.
Show me him and his growth toward
Yeah.
the dark side. Like, show me that, because that was like, oh man, because it's those moments where it's worked out with other characters who want something else, and he's like, you're weak, and they're torturing him, and you're like, oh shoot, this guy's like not tripping around.
That's why book 2 was the hardest book to finish, because of how little Bane was in it. Because in book 1, the dark side has many facets. We've talked about this. We know that. Book 1 was his upbringing, and then his rise into the strength, the physical ability and power of Bane. Then he gets defeated in that way in combat by the Zabrak. I can't remember his name. And then he goes into the intellect side. He goes into diving into study and learning the machinations of the Force. Then he becomes and makes the thought bomb. And he's just a master of the Force at that point. Book 2, he's got the Orbalisk armor. He's pretty much untouchable physically, and he doesn't really get too much as far as improvement is concerned in his intellect side, which that's where Xana, her whole plot in book 2 was that, her ability to manipulate, her ability to deceive. And then when she decided, she revealed herself to that other, like, faux Sith guy, I can't remember his name either, and just, like, tortures one of his bodyguards' minds to where she's mentally gone and writhing on the floor. And then in the 3rd book, you have Bane return to form with no longer having the Orbalisk armor, still a master duelist. I love in the first part of the book where he's dancing in the rain and not a single drop touches him. That was beautifully illustrated. That's probably my favorite scene of the trilogy that's narrated. But then you also see his master manipulation come back in that torture scene, and I really, really like that.
Yeah, that was fun. That's probably my favorite scene, because we get to see the head-to-head with Bane against opposing forces. It revealed Bane Prime.
Bane Prime.
But tell us a little more about the other stuff that you disagreed with me on. Let's just get into it. Let's just pull the Band-Aid off.
Okay. Are you talking about when he got captured by the assassin?
Yeah, and like I said, okay, this stuff went off, and they needed 20 people plus a master sorcerer to deal with it, and it's like, well, why don't you give him, the tremor on the hand during his duel where it's doing something he doesn't want it to do anyway?
Well, so they already set you up in the very beginning of the book for this scene. There's a lot of foreshadowing in this book alone, from the beginning to even that scene, which is, I think, like 2/3 of the way in. But in the beginning, when the Huntress is introduced to the scene where that one Jedi, and I can't remember his name either, is meeting with the people on that planet, the miners, and then he just all of a sudden, split second, feels a disturbance and then pretty much gets completely massacred by this Huntress. So why she was the only one to be able to get the drop on him had already been explained. She has the ability to be naturally stealthy in the Force and in the physical. So that's why, I guess, the hand tremor thing, yes, that would have been cool flavor, but they also already gave the foreshadowing. So it wasn't just she can do this, and then Bane falls or gets captured.
That's fair.
So I just wanted to call that back, because it's not like she was just built as a super Huntress and she can do all these things. she had a very small section of the book there where she could prove, even to a Master Jedi, that she can sneak up on whoever she wants, whether they be a Force wielder or not, and carry out her mission. That's why the princess hired her.
I concede that point, but the tremor of the flavor during the battle would have been, oh, chef's kiss.
I think he left that part out, or at least it left out more details on something like that, because he wanted to narrate it from like 3 or 4 different perspectives. Like he had Juliana, I can't even remember, the old Gloomwalker friend, military gal, and then you had the princess, and then you had all the other soldiers, and then you had Bane. So he was narrating it from 3 or 4 different perspectives right there anyway. So the more time he spent on, oh, remember, hand tremor? All right, he's captured.
Yeah.
That's how I feel like it would have been received had he said something like that, even if it was just like one piece of, like 1 or 2 lines. Like in the middle of a flourish, Bane's hand trembles and he loses grip on his lightsaber, and a blaster bolt deflects it and it becomes a weak grip, and then it falls out of his hand or something like that. Even if that happened, he surrounds himself with the Force and then gets back at it. But the Huntress negates that ability by being immune to his, immune to the Force, immune to his senses. So she can bypass his greatest offense and defense and neutralize him and subdue him.
Makes sense.
The biggest one was, this is just kind of going into it, the biggest one that I wanted to talk about was why he was so weak in this book. Why Drew decided to write him as so much weaker than he actually was. I want to hear, well, both, but I want to hear Slava's point, because Jonathan, you talked about it a lot at the end of the last episode, but Slava, why do you think that Drew wrote Bane as so weak?
That's kind of hinted at right off the bat in the prologue of Dynasty of Evil. His use of the dark side, the orbalisks that ate a lot of his power and health. He had them for like a few years, I think. And his age. The older you get, and this is kind of explained in the book too, like it's like a sentence or two, but that's enough. The older you get, the weaker the Force makes you. So you constantly have to find new ways, new Sith teachings to either prolong your life or to do a retroactive healing of the effects of the Force and then continue to use the Force, but you're still using the Force to do it. As Bane or other Sith get older, depending on the extent of the use of the Force, they just get progressively weaker.
Okay. Jonathan, a quick summary, if you will.
Well, brevity's not my strong suit, but we'll see what I can do. As you're well aware, both of you and the audience, everyone's aware of my ability for brevity. So while we were going through the book, I honestly wasn't sure if he was going to kill Bane off, which I like. I think Bane is powerful enough to keep going, and I think Xana could overcome him with her sorcery, but I think that she didn't have the leadership skills to be able to become the new Sith Lord. We hadn't seen her even vetting any apprentices. She literally went to the supermarket, was like, this one's sort of evil. I'll just take him, I guess. It was like, wow. I honestly, if I could make one analogy for something that to me seems obvious, that's what it seems like today's dating scene is. Don't at me in the comments.
Well, we're both married now, so you don't even have to worry about
this
that.
One seems human, I guess. I liked the Dark Jedi thing. I really think to see him play more. But you asked about Bane, and I'm getting lost on the other stuff. I mean, outside of him needing to decide whether or not he was going to keep Bane and kill Xana, or keep Xana and kill Bane, I don't see another reason for him to make Bane weak, outside of like what Slava said, where you get older, the dark side eats away at you. He didn't delve into more of the dark side itself. He was just focusing on the Rule of Two, which is fine. Makes sense. That's kind of what the whole series is leading up to. But yeah, I don't know about his weakness, I guess. All that rambling to say.
You said it right there at the very end. The whole series is built around an ideology, and that's why book 2 is named The Rule of Two. So it was always built to culminate in who is going to succeed Bane. And at the beginning of this book and at the end of last book, he starts to find out about Darth Ondedu and preserving his life, which I think is quite interesting because from the Sith perspective, their ideology is to destroy the Jedi and bring about the will of the dark side, okay, and just acquire power and continuously grow in strength. But there always comes to a point to where their physical limitations start to hold them back. And at that point, and we see in book 3, Bane does not want that to happen. He wants to be defeated by somebody more powerful than him who he has bestowed his knowledge and power on. Xana is the other way around. She wants Bane to continuously grow so she can learn, so that way she doesn't take any of the risk. She's afraid. Fear is a path to the dark side. So Bane, being as weak as he is getting, is starting to realize that, oh, Xana will never be stronger than me because she is waiting for me to become weak. So I must now preserve my own life, and that way I can just rule forever, which we see multiple times after this in Star Wars history. You see it with a couple different Sith Lords in the years to come, to where they want to basically become immortal because their hunger for power succeeds anything else. They just want to become more and more and more and more powerful. They can never be satisfied. So they are preserving their own life, which is very telling for both sides of the Force. Like the light side of the Force, the Jedi want to preserve life, basically anything but mine. I will sacrifice my own life to preserve everyone else's. The dark side is I will sacrifice everybody else's life to preserve my own in search of more power and just continuously grow. So I think that's really cool for the light and the dark. It's all about preserving life, but it's all about whose life you're actually preserving. And why they made Bane get so weak is for that to kind of take hold, I think. To let Xana either make the decision of, I am going to usurp my master and take what's mine, or what's rightfully mine, by his theology. And then Bane sees it as, she's waiting for me to get weak. She does not deserve this power. So I'm going to live forever and rule forever.
I think you bring out a necessary detail for both Jonathan and I to more fully understand the dynamic that's happening in this last book, their perspectives, and the impetus that each has to wait, to learn more, to gather more dark side knowledge, more Sith knowledge, and then kill Bane, versus like, you should already know and you should already have challenged me. So why are you so weak? That's something I didn't pick up on reading that book.
I feel like Xana is actually a more in-depth character than Bane.
In this book, I can agree with that as well. Just because you're hot off the heels of pretty much her story in book 2. And then they reintroduce Bane as this weak character.
Right.
Because last time you saw him, he was also pretty fried, got his Orbalisk armor off, and that's pretty much it. His fall from grace started probably in the middle of book 2. But then you see him without any of his defenses start to grow ever so slightly, basically become driven mad by his desire to live and continuously grow. But Xana sees that as weakness because now he is trying to live forever. And this is narrated very well in one of the chapters, I think probably in the middle of the book, where he writes it from her perspective as, okay, Bane wants to live forever, so he's taking away what's rightfully mine, my birthright, basically, because he chose me to succeed him and defeat him. But if he is continuously growing and getting more power, then I want to learn these things before I challenge him. But if he's going to live forever, then I'm going to go out of my way, find my own apprentice, come back, and kill him my way.
Yeah.
And that's why it gets so stunted and it comes to such a head there, because he leaves it as who actually won, which is where I wanted to go in with my next question. Who do you guys actually think won that fight? The Battle of Wills.
Bane. Bane won.
My girl, Xana.
Oh, so we're
She got him.
split. We're
She got him.
split. Okay.
She didn't get him.
All right.
She wasn't ready. She couldn't do
Couldn't
it.
handle
She
the
couldn't
heat.
handle the
Okay.
heat.
So he narrates it at the end because Xana's body is what they were fighting over, essentially. So, Jonathan, you think Bane won.
Is that another modern take on dating?
There's a joke there, but I'll save that for off podcast.
So Jonathan's been married for 2 months and already he's making, dating jokes.
It's a Star War, and it seemed like an apt time to cut the rug, as they say.
Okay. I want to get both your guys' take on it. I want to get why, Jonathan, you think Bane won, and Slava, why you think Xana won.
Bane won because he was studying Dark Undeadu, and this is an attack that Xana has never experienced, far as we know, of someone coming and usurping your entire body. Bane already used his will to overcome Dark Undeadu's holocron, from what we understand. And so he's got at least one experience point more than she does.
One experience point. I like the way you look at it. I do.
To me, that's the only point that needs to be said, is because he's got more experience in this than her. Even though she's a powerful sorceress, she simply doubts herself, and that's honestly why I think that she's a better character than Bane, depth-wise.
So I think she won, despite the whole hand tremor. I'm going to assume that's just the remnants of Bane, and I'm going to make a parenthetical note. I don't think Bane is completely gone, destroyed out of existence. But I think she won because she knows Sith voodoo, Sith magic. Despite the fact that she doubts herself, she has been more focused on growing. And my final piece of evidence, she identifies herself as, I am Darth Xana and you are my apprentice.
Okay. So Xana won for Slava. Bane won for Jonathan. So, spoiler alert, I know what happens.
Wait. I just want to counteract one thing. Your line about I am Darth Xana. So I am just going to sow some doubt with the audience for those of us who still don't know the future. So because Slav and I don't know the future. Well, he might have looked something up. But I think that Bane would have said that regardless because he likes to live in the shadows and work in mystery. And then he might come out with a bang later and a reveal as to it still being him as a tool, as a resource he can use. Okay, that's
Spoken
it.
like
All right,
a
Matt,
true
let us know
Sith.
the answer.
So, canon, and this is one of the few books that is from the extended universe or expanded universe or whatever universe they call it, that Disney has decided to bring into their canon, is Bane. So, according to canon, Bane still exists somewhere in the Force. Before you celebrate, Jonathan, that does not mean that he beat Xana in that moment, okay? So in book 1, the thought bomb, let's bring it back to the Force. The thought bomb, when that went off, it trapped all of the souls inside of that thought bomb, inside of that big ominous orb. Bane goes over and touches it, basically transferring the essence of every soul in that orb into his consciousness. Now, you could look at it from a couple different ways as far as, are those people a part of Bane? Or did they overtake Bane? Are they now a part of his psyche? Did they improve? Is it a detriment? It's however you want to look at it. They still exist inside of that consciousness and maybe potentially have some form of effect on Bane, positive or negative. Because when one of the other masters kept showing up in his dreams and hallucinations and stuff like that, it was seen as a detriment.
Right.
But it was something for Bane to overcome, and in the end made him more powerful, more strong in his mind. So now we transport all the way to the final battle in Book 3, where Bane and Xana locked in combat. The two apprentices are looking on. Bane essentially loses in physical combat, which is what he was built as the greatest master of, because he beat the Sith Blade Master in single combat. Then he loses to his apprentice, to Xana. And at that moment, all doubt that she is the Lord of the Sith leaves her mind, and she basically says, I am all-powerful. I am more powerful than you. I take your life, and I am the Lord of the Sith. Bane pulls out the Ace of Spades and goes straight for the throat, and he totally goes right into her consciousness, and it's basically a battle of wills there. And when that happens, Xana's will crumbles. And I think Bane completely overtakes her and her consciousness and basically wins. But that does not mean that Xana is lost. Xana is still in there. Basically, Bane traded bodies with her, and Xana's still existing inside of his head. So all of her power, and this is what makes the Sith so scary in this essence transfer type thing, is that he maintains his knowledge, which is what Xana was hungry for, but then Bane gets all of her physical abilities on top of her sorcery and stuff like that. So honestly, they both win here, but Bane succeeds in his goal of taking over. But then from there, we don't know if he does it again and again and again and again, and we don't know if Palpatine is Bane. We don't know that. I doubt it. But over the several thousand years, I'm sure the actual rule of two, came about. But the end of the book, I think Bane is the clear winner from what I had just said about him just basically doing a surprise attack, taking over, because all doubt, and what I think Drew did a masterstroke here was he narrated, all right, Xana defeats him in melee combat, and then she basically, how I see it in my brain, is he's kneeling on the ground and she's like standing there all shoulders back and like the power pose, right? Then Bane's just like looking down, like all sullen, like, all right, chop my head off, kill me. And then he like glances up at her. And then fear immediately goes right back into her soul, and he just goes right in and totally overtakes her. And I think that was very, very, one, beautifully written, but two, it's just a great jumping off point for the theology of the Sith now, too, because now he gets to pick which apprentice he wants.
So you're telling me that I'm right?
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Oh, so my comment earlier,
So
people tell me I'm right often. Now you just got to like dangle it in front of me, but not actually confirm it. Okay, cool.
So I agree with you on 2 points of this book.
Glad to be back with you on your podcast. Thanks for that.
Yes, Darth Slava and Jedi Master Matt.
I'd rather be a Dark Jedi. Dark, whatever his name is. What's his name?
Set Hearth, yeah.
Hearth.
Set Hearth. Yeah, he's fun. But I think I have more of the Sith in me than you guys realize. Because I've been...
No, we're all very aware of it.
Okay, good. Because
there's no questions.
I've been manipulating this whole conversation for it to come to this point. I looked up the answer the other day on Drew Karpyshyn's blog, where he specifically addresses...
Of course you did. I knew this was coming.
Where he specifically...
You're very predictable.
Where he reveals his intention with how he wrote the ending.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. I don't think I've read this.
Well, now I'm thinking that you're probably right, because I don't think that you would purposefully take a wrong answer with having the evidence that you're incorrect.
Yes. You make a good apprentice, Jonathan.
That's the beautiful thing about opinions, Jonathan.
I'm
you
not
can
an
still
apprentice.
have one and be wrong and know it. Like I like
No.
ketchup on my tacos.
Matt, it was great having you on today. I think your mic is cutting out. We're going to have to let you go.
So Drew tells us that Xana won.
What does he know?
Yeah. So he goes, so who won the final confrontation between Bane and Xana? I'll be honest. I thought I was pretty clear in my writing. I won't give him that, because I was leaning more towards Bane before I looked this up, to be quite honest. I wrote the scene from Congress's point of view to keep you guessing to the last instant. But when Xana proclaims Darth Bane is gone, I am Darth Xana, Dark Lord of the Sith, and your new master, I thought it would be pretty clear. I realize this confusion is my fault. My writing is usually very straightforward. I tend to eschew ambiguity because it leads to misinterpretation. I am usually very explicit about my characters and authorial intent. Then he also says, I didn't want this to be a gotcha moment, so I assumed that everybody would figure out. Now I'm paraphrasing that there's no twist.
Sure.
When she says I am Xana, that's the end of the ambiguity. Now I don't agree with him. I think that there is ambiguity there, and I think that's what makes it interesting. And I didn't go out searching for this. I wanted opinions from the field, so to say. I wanted Reddit to, arguments on Reddit to kind of feed my opinion of this, so then I would make my own decision.
It was on his For You page.
The second result on Google search was Drew Karpyshyn's blog, and I'm like,
Drew's answer.
like, okay, well, this is easy.
Well, I gotta click this. It's drawing me to it, like Darth Undeadu.
So I'll be honest. When I read about the hand twitch, I'm like, Bane's in there. This is all a lie. And I was same thing that you said, Jonathan. That's just Bane tricking the Huntress. He's just going to pretend that he's Xana. And then I was like, well, no. If this is the last book, why would he do that? That seems bad writing to me, because end of the book, and it's been, more than 1 year since then the book, so there's no follow-up books for a while. I'm like, well, let me see what Reddit thinks. And I'm going to try to find the answer, just like Darth Bane trying to find a holocron. And I was almost disappointed because I got it so
The
quick.
Star Wars rabbit hole Slava's crawling down now.
But there's no rabbit hole.
Welcome.
I peeked my head in the rabbit hole. There was Drew in Xana 1. I was like, well, shit, this is... So I thought, how do I make this interesting? So that's the reason for the setup, guys. Because I was like, that kind of stinks. I thought it'd be harder earned.
Well, it's pop fiction, right? Like, we've talked
Yeah.
about this. Pop fiction's not supposed to be super mind-numbing. It's not the word.
Thought-provoking?
Pop fiction's not supposed to be thought-provoking. Thank you. It's not supposed to be super thought-provoking. So I kind of knew that I might be wrong, but because I tend to think through every minute detail, and sometimes seeing to Matt plays D&D, if you see a beggar and you make note and you tell your characters and they're like, oh my god, this is going to be a beggar that like turns into a hag and then we're going to fight him, and it's like, no, it's just a beggar.
It's a super NPC.
Yeah, just begging for coins. Just that's all there was.
Here's the last line of the blog post by Drew Karpyshyn. So there it is, Xana 1. Bane tried to possess her and failed, but he wasn't completely destroyed. Though how much of him remains is something I'm going to leave open for now.
So that line right there pretty much counteracts every point he made in that entire blog post. Like, all right, so who actually won? I don't want to leave anything to ambiguity. All right, Drew, you just left everything to ambiguity.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I started off with,
Yeah.
because he's like, I don't want any ambiguity. I'm like, well, you wrote it
Yeah.
pretty ambiguous. That's why the three of us are having the conversations that we're having, because we're not three dumb guys who don't understand how
Right.
the English language works or how literature works. He seems to be talking out of both sides of his mouth.
And I don't know if he's doing that just to make it more of something just to be talked about, or if it's just a masterstroke of his authorian. I mean, these books are old, and we're still talking about them today, and how great they are, how great the storytelling was. And it leaves it up to debate, which I think is a great way to end a series. Because now there is like a definitive who actually won. But even though Drew says this is what happened, it's the IP of Star Wars still belongs to somebody else. So whether or not he meant to mean something, somebody else bought his IP or bought an IP that he was writing for and decided to change that. So when you leave something up without a clear end with ambiguity, without ambiguity, people can change the outcome if it's left teetering.
Okay, so on that point, you said something a minute ago. I wanted to let you finish your thoughts, so I want to circle back. There's multiple canons, ?
Okay, long story long. In 2012, George Lucas sold Star Wars and Lucasfilm to Disney. Okay? Now, before that, Lucasfilm and George Lucas owned the Star Wars IP. Okay? They had worked on all kinds of things. And it's the same. I mean, Lucasfilm was bought by Disney. Okay? Which has a lot of other things. Yeah.
Opinions aside.
But so Star Wars coming into it, George Lucas let other authors expand on his universe. George Lucas is responsible for the movies and the canon surrounding the Skywalker series. Okay? So that would be episode 1 through 6. So he wrote the original trilogy and then the prequel trilogy. Now, everybody can have their own opinions on how good those are, whatever. But it's the Skywalker saga, okay? So, obviously, this takes place in a universe with years past and years future. So, there he gave authors, lots of different authors, free reign to write what happens after the events of Episode 6 and before the events of Episode 6. But they all have to remain that the Skywalker saga is the culmination of this universe. So you can't change the source, which is this is where everything was kind of ending up. Okay? So then in the expanded universe, you have books of Luke Skywalker as a Grand Master and fighting Darth Krayt, which if we do decide to read more Star Wars books, I would love to read one of those. But he goes and fights interdimensional or intergalactic enemies at that point. And then there's a whole other creature called Abeloth, which is basically like from another universe and is this fearsome, dark entity creature that Luke has to face off with. And then you have books like the Darth Bane trilogy. You have Revan. You have the High Republic, the New Republic era, which is all thousands of years before the Skywalker saga. So that is, long story long, lots of different canon, because when Lucasfilm was bought by Disney, they scrapped everything except for the movies. Now, they have cherry-picked over the last several years when they did the Clone Wars TV show, and that's where they picked Bane up because Yoda ended up going to some planet, meeting with, I can't remember. God, I might screw this up, so don't at me in the comments, but Yoda is on a planet, and then he finds a artifact. I don't know if it's a holocron or not, but Bane appears as like a force entity, and it's Darth Bane. It's not Darth Xana. So they have cherry-picked a couple different things, and even Revan has been brought into the fold a couple of times, which is, I mean, I'm happy about, but he already existed to me. So that's where a lot of the really hardcore fans have drawn a lot of issue with, one, the way Disney's handling a lot of the canon, but two, they're so much better than all the Disney stuff that's kind of come out, which I agree with. I think they had so much information, so many original ideas that why would they, one, scrap it all, but two, end up just rebranding and using bits and pieces of it just to dangle those keys in front of everybody, the member berries. I remember.
Okay. I don't actually know what that is, but that's fine.
It's a South Park scene where they have grapes and they have faces and it goes, member berries, I remember. It's basically dangling keys in front of people just for that reason, to get views.
Right. Okay. So this is my question, and Slava, why do you think that Disney would do this? And then I want to hear Matt's expert opinion on it. Look, businesses, and I'm going to say this a million times over, and you will hear it in a million episodes where I talk about business. Businesses exist to make money, period. That's it. That's why they exist. And their flavor that they're doing and using is whatever they're good at. Okay. So businesses exist to make money. How does this make Disney money outside of like, okay, well, if we cut all that out as canon, we can make our own canon. But the audience that gives you the money says you're an idiot. Slava, any thoughts?
If I'm putting myself in Disney's head for this particular side quest, option one, they're looking at what will make them the most money. The simple answer is like they looked across all of canon and said, this seems like it's more profitable. The rest of it, we might make a little bit of money. Yeah, there's people clamoring for this, but who cares? This is what we're looking at it. We're a business, to use your quote, Jonathan. We're here to make money. Option two, they did go out to people, and not everybody wanted to sell their IP. Or there was complications, and then they said, hey, we're not dealing with these, low-level writers from their point of view.
Yeah, it's a bit Disney.
Yeah, we just want this thing. We want Lucas's IP because it's the most interesting, it's the most profitable. That's all we want to do. This is the easy cash grab. A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yep.
That would be my answer.
Okay.
Matt, resident
I'm
expert,
going to take a deep breath so I don't get angry.
Dark Jedi.
Um,
Please don't break my
so
stuff.
I think why they did what they did. Why? Well, one, George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney because he wanted to spend more time with his family. That is his quote. That is his reason for doing so. Power to George, work-life balance, right? So what Disney does is want to reach a larger audience and sacrifice the niche. So what they did, instead of expanding on an expanded universe, and if they kept going in a lot of different ways, they would have to say all these new people who are now getting into Star Wars, i.e. younger kids of like the Zoomer generation, they have to they have all this other source material that they have to read or acquire in order to understand what is going on. So if they scrap all that and start anew, they don't have to do that. So that pissed off in my opinion, a significant chunk of the fan base, but it also made it far more available to the rest of the world, which from a financial aspect, 25% of sales going to the niche audience and the other 75% to a potential new global audience and age groups financially makes more sense, yes, because businesses exist to make money, and if that's why they did that, smart business move, but it's a sacrifice, and we're seeing it now in 2024, what that actually did to the brand and why it is basically bankrupt because it has not been expanded on in anything of quality. It's been very, very safe and very, very lackluster, and it's been, and this is just my personal opinion, it has been a very large cultural vehicle rather than an exciting IP.
Woof.
So,
yeah. What's your Star Wars hot take on something negative? Yeah, something negative, Star Wars hot take in canon and in Disney. Let's separate
all right,
the two
well,
opinions.
I have two. Just one?
Just one.
All
Just
right,
one.
which one do I put
yeah,
first?
Okay.
They killed what made it great in the first place. They absolutely destroyed the biggest characters in cinematic history for no reason, honestly, other than to push their cultural influence with this IP, which is killing Luke Skywalker by trying too hard, killing Han Solo and making him a deadbeat dad, and not making the most of Carrie Fisher while she was still alive. And that is one of the most...
Oh, man, they killed Han Solo, making him a deadbeat? I feel like he'd be like a John Wayne, like exactly like
because
he was
that's who he
supposed to be.
was in 4, 5, and 6. He was a smuggler.
Right.
He was a scoundrel. Right. He was just a very rough and tumble hardcore guy. And at the end of episode 6, he was, in love with a beautiful girl, very good human at that point, very selfless.
Yeah, he had some character growth.
Yeah. And then you see him 30, 35, I don't know. I don't remember how many years because I don't care. But a number of years after that is where episode 7 picks up. And he basically had a baby with Leia, left the family to go gallivant around the galaxy, loses the Millennium Falcon, which is his most prized possession, loses the Millennium Falcon.
He would never do that.
No, he wouldn't. And he still runs around with Chewbacca. Then in episode 7, they made the most egregious sin of all, and they did not stick any of them in a scene together, or all of them in a scene together. There was Han, Leia, and Chewbacca in a scene, but Luke never was on screen with all of them. The original cast members, the original main characters, never got in a single scene together. All of them at once. And that was the biggest sin that the sequels, I think, could have had. So there's my hot takes. They destroyed what made it great. They destroyed the foundation of what built the Empire. Pun intended. Hardy har.
Okay, there we go. All right.
Yep.
I honestly think they went completely backwards because they tried to do a hard reset without completely wiping the slate clean. All they did was erase details.
A lazy reset.
And make everything so much more obscure.
Yeah.
What I think of it as is like a whiteboard, and then you have the linear line, which is like the Skywalker saga, and then with the expanded universe, you have so many other details all the way around. And then you hand that whiteboard to Disney, Disney takes a giant eraser and erases all of the details that make everything so much more nuanced and beautiful in the world of Star Wars. And then they just leave the major plot point. Then they move the plot point to the back, and then they say, this is the new way that we're going. And it is basically bass-ackwards here, and it is so bad. I am very opinionated. I've only seen all 3 of the new sequel movies once, and I have spent more time talking shit about them than I actually spent watching the movies. After I watched, I think it was the second one, episode 8, I went to a family shindig. I think it was like a Christmas party, because all those movies came out around Christmas time or in the winter there.
It's a good time to make money.
It is. Good financial move. Anyway, so I went back to a family Christmas party after that, and I didn't say anything. Like, I walked in, said my hellos, and I went down into the basement to hang out with all of my cousins. All the parents were upstairs playing cards or whatever they were doing. I went downstairs, and I sat there, and I was abnormally quiet. As Jonathan knows, I like to talk a little bit.
Brevity's his strong suit.
And as I'm sure all of you know at my new podcast here, I like to talk, especially about Star Wars. So I'm sitting there, and I'm just abnormally silent. And my cousin goes, Matt, what's wrong? You're like really quiet. And I was like, so I just watched Star Wars. And they're like, oh, did you like it? Oh my gosh. And I'm like, no, I hated it. And then nobody said a word for about an hour and a half except for me. And I just let it fly, man. I tell you, it came out. It was just all over the
Diarrhea
place.
of the mouth.
And I was not happy. And at the end, I did a... So that's why I'm not very happy. And then one of my cousins, the very audacity of family, goes, so did you like it, or?
So you're telling me you're pretty close with that family member, and they know you very well.
I'm very close with, all of my family that know me pretty well, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got Star Wars tattooed all over my body. Everybody knows that I like Star Wars a significant amount more than most people.
Oh, man.
Well, to jump off of that, I just got a quick side quest. I was sitting with my wife and her family. This was like me a year being married. And we're at a Thanksgiving dinner. And it's going horribly because of reasons. Because her family sucks.
Hot take.
Is this about Star Wars or?
No, it's about Titanic.
It's about Titanic. Is another side quest. It's about Titanic.
Oh my gosh. Okay, quick side quest to interrupt. My wife asked me if I watched Titanic, and I said no, and she's like, what? I was like, I know how the story ends. The boat sinks. I've seen the movie because I know history.
Jack dies, the boat sinks.
Anyway.
So people around the table are talking about how great Titanic is. And this is like 10 years after Titanic or 11 years after Titanic came out. It came out when I was around 17. I'm now about 28. And something inside me snapped. And it's not that I really hate Titanic. I'm very ambivalent about the movie. I think the story's lackluster. Effects are nice. Great, whatever. I watched it once or twice. I'm done. But something inside me snapped. And I said, so wait a minute. So you guys are telling me this is a love story. A rich, spoiled brat cheats on her fiance with a homeless guy, lets him frickin' die.
You gotta hide your proclivities.
I'll grant you that the fiance is a piece of crap, but she cheats on him with a homeless guy, lets the homeless guy die. Then 80 years later, the love story, she remembers banging a homeless guy. And then she has like an $80 million necklace she throws in the ocean because reasons. Like, that is the shittiest movie in the world. And then the conversation ended and we went home like 20 minutes later.
Much more of an emotional response than rather trying to elicit a logical response, because logically, none of that makes sense. And I am on board with you, Slava. That makes no sense at all.
Even if she had a little tryst, fine, with the homeless guy, and left her deadbeat, well, he's not a deadbeat, but left her complete jackwad of a fiance, and then went on to get married and have grandchildren, have a full life. All right. I just thought the vehicle of telling a story of a tryst on a boat before the boat sank. Yeah, I get why people like it. It's like big and epic, but the story is crap, and nobody liked me for that. And I was like, all right, well, screw you guys.
And nobody liked me for that.
Remind me how that's a Star Wars thought?
He said it was a side quest.
Oh, there was a lot of stars out that night when people were drowning in the cold water.
And he went to war with the emotional response people.
Thank you, Matt.
Titanic 2 Electric Boogaloo.
So now that we gotten off track as we normally do, like, what are some things that you love about Star Wars? What makes Matt a Star Wars fan?
What makes Matt a Star Wars fan? I think, like most things, as children, we latch onto a certain number of things that pique our interest because of what it makes us what we want to be. Like most people, it's superheroes. Like I want to be like Superman, or I want to be like Iron Man or Captain America, stuff like that. For me, it was Luke Skywalker. It was a Jedi. I related so much to him because I'm a very creative person. And when I was a child, I had a very, very creative brain. We didn't have video games too much when I was really little. So I would watch a movie. That was my form of media that would spur my creative mind. And then I would go outside, make my own guns out of wood, out of sticks and logs and stuff like that. And then I would play Star Wars.
Classic.
So I had it in my head like all of these things are going to happen if I was in the world of Star Wars. Then he makes more movies. And then I'm a little bit older. So then it's a callback to like, all right, you ready for some more Star Wars? And then it's all exactly not the same, but it's the same idea, just written in a different part of the history. And it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much more that I can just add to it. It's basically, with D&D, it's constantly expanding lore, constantly expanding universe from similar authors that have a lot of the same ideas. And it's continuous. There's a lot of good continuity there. It's not like a giant stepping off point like it is with the Disney and Lucasfilm kind of deal. It constantly expands on the IP, on the idea. So why I am such a big fan is because it continuously is expanding. It's ever expanding. But I also get the freedom to insert myself, not necessarily in another character or have representation, but I can insert myself and think about what I would do were I in this universe. And it is pretty much infinite. And that's why I like it so much.
Love that.
Yeah, totally.
What's the follow-up book that you would suggest from this?
So the follow-up book, and this is going to be kind of hard for, first-time Star Wars people and even you guys. I would say either Revan,
yes,
or the Clone Trooper series. But Revan is going to be a tough one because where the book Revan starts is it's the conclusion to Revan's story. So all of the character building that you have to Revan is deep, deep, deep inside of Knights of the Old Republic video game that Drew was a part of, and then a lot of other pieces of, lore where he appears in. So it's a very, very expanded backstory that is necessary to understand Revan as a character and then the conclusion of Revan, which that's what the book is. And I think I've sent you guys a couple of different videos with little timestamps and stuff about like Revan and his story and just like a basic overview. It may not mean as much to you as far as the character, but he is my favorite character in all of Star Wars canon. That's why I have him tattooed on my body. That's why he is, I think, the most interesting character in Star Wars as well, because of the depth and the care that people took to writing him and the characters that actually surrounded him, because the characters that he was surrounded by in every iteration of him, whether it's in the games, whether it's in books, whether it's in comics, whatever it is, are just as interesting. We always say a hero's only as good as his villain. This hero is only as good as the people and the mission that he is surrounded by and he completes. Because the whole story of Mandalore and the Mandalorian Wars is like Marvel's Avengers level of nuance. And it takes a lot to kind of it takes a lot to kind of understand where the state of the world is, the state of the Jedi Order at that point, and the state of the Outer Rim, which is where all of the evil kind of lives and stuff like that. So, and then it also takes some understanding to know who the villain truly is in Revan's story. Because you meet bad guys, or mini-bosses I call them, in different parts of like the game, in other comics and stuff like that. But there is always an overarching bad guy. So think of the original trilogy, okay? Darth Vader is the bad guy, but he's not the bad guy. Palpatine is the bad guy. You don't see him very much, but he's always behind the scenes. In the prequel trilogy, it's the same thing. The bad guy is Darth Maul. The bad guy is Count Dooku. The bad guy is General Grievous. But the bad guy is always higher, and it's Palpatine. Okay? In the Revan series, or in the Revan era, it is Vitiate, which is a name very few Star Wars fans will know, but he is expanded on a little bit in different forms of Star Wars media. So there's a lot to the Revan book that is needed to be understood before I think we read it. But I think the Revan book, I know Slava was very excited when I said it, but the Revan book I think would be a very, very fun one. So I don't know if you guys want to do like a couple of podcasts or an episode where I do like an overview before, and then we read the book, and then I come in afterwards. You guys talk about the book, and then I come in afterwards. I don't know. I don't know how you guys want to handle that, because that's a very special scenario. As opposed to the Clone Trooper books, we can just jump right in.
Well, I think for something like Revan, we could have you on for each episode if you want, and then you can explore. Well, you won't be exploring. As we explore, you be our guide.
I will be guiding
on the journey. And I think the Force wants us to read Revan because I've been getting it suggested to me every day on Audible for the last like 2 months. And I finally put it in my wish list, and it still keeps popping up. I'm like, yeah, it's in my wish list. Shut up, Audible. It just keeps coming up. And I'm reading a Stephen King book, but when I open up my Audible app after I close it down completely,
can't run from Star Wars.
It has Star Wars stuff, other books you might like based on your listening from 3 months ago. Revan, I'm like, yes, thank you. We will read Revan.
Revan is one of the silent, influential characters of the Star Wars universe as well. Just like how Bane is. Not a lot of people know who Bane is, but he brings about the idea of the Sith that is so influential in Star Wars universe. It sets up the evil to the good. And Revan does the opposite, kind of. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. He basically shows a prequel version to bringing balance and what it means to live in the light side as like the holy warrior, and then it goes to the opposite, which is the fall from grace. Because Anakin had a fall from grace to becoming Darth Vader, yes, but he was never considered like the holy warrior. He was always the troubled, gifted kid who just went down the wrong path, or was manipulated to go down the wrong path. He was susceptible. All of the things that Revan did were his choice. He was not manipulated until he became a Dark Jedi or a Sith. Because at that point, he had influence in his mind, but he then became as powerful of a dark side user because of his abilities as a Jedi, of how powerful he was and how opinionated he was, which is what made him easier to basically be manipulated by Vitiate. So it's
interesting.
There's so much nuance surrounding Revan, and it's very, very like if you think the Bane Reddit channels are a little deep, wait till you crawl down the Revan rabbit hole, because I still do it from time to time, and I learn new things, where I hear different takes, and I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, I guess I didn't really think about it from that perspective. And that's the cool thing about Star Wars, and why I like the way that, well, bringing it back to, Dynasty of Evil, the way that it was left at an ambiguous ending leaves us something to talk about and disagree on and theorize on. That's what makes Star Wars so great.
This episode, Matt?
Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. And through victory, my chains are broken, and the Force shall set me free. That's the Sith code. That's the mantra. We'll see y'all next time.
Thank you for joining us today on SideQuest. Be sure to rate and review and share us with your friends so more people can be turned to the dark side.
And stay tuned for the next episode where we dive into Baal. We look at Kuwait's new rising messiah living in the wilderness. See you next time on SideQuest.